Kevin, let's start off with the MSCI because I want to throw up this chart on the Bloomberg. And essentially, you're looking at potentially if Pakistan, given that Pakistan is going to be added, the sort of exodus of frontier investors away from Pakistan going into Vietnam may actually help boost that upside when it comes to Vietnamese stocks. Is that one of the tailwind factors that you're looking at the moment?
Not so much really in the MSCI frontier, because there's not a great deal of money, relatively speaking, that follows that. With the MSCI Emerging Index, it's somewhere around 1.7 or 1.8 trillion dollars. So, going on to the MSCI Emerging watch list and hopefully into the MSCI Emerging Index will make a significant difference. But the amount of money that gets diverted from Pakistan to Vietnam in a market that's now turning over a couple of $100 million a day is not going to be terribly significant, I don't think.
When you look at the VN index, we're already beyond what most analysts thought was the upside for 2017. How much further upside do you see? And do you think valuations are still attractive, given that you do have a raising rate environment, I should say, out of the US, and also that risk of what happens with the dollar and also with the Chinese currency?
Yeah, well, obviously we have a managed board against the US dollar and with similar daily fixings to the US. So that has enabled the Vietnamese currency to maintain a pretty stable path over the last 6 years or so, or sorry, 5 years or so. If the US raises rates and we don't, then obviously there's some pressure on the currency. If China devalues, then we would probably follow suit. But government policy is for 1.5 to 2% annual devaluation in order to maintain export competitiveness. So, in terms of valuations, we are. On a weighted average basis, it looks we're somewhere in the 15 to 16 times 2017 earnings. We do see much greater growth next year than this. And if you look at an individual stock basis, there are some, extremely cheap blue chips, as well as some fairly fully priced ones. So I think, it's time for some selective shopping, if you like.
Right. And Kevin, how do you rate the pace of financial system and market reform that's going on? And given that you do expect Vietnam to be added to the watch list this time around, how long do you think it'll be before it gets added to the EM index?
Well, it's a minimum of 2 years, because you spend at least a year on the watch list. Then if you're successfully promoted, as it were, then that happens a year after that. So, if we are told, if Vietnam is told in June 2018 that it will go into the Emerging Markets Index, which we're not convinced will happen that quickly, but the earliest possible time for actual inclusion would be in June 2019. Obviously, Pakistan was told a year ago that it's being promoted or redesignated, and that becomes effective next month. So, there is a year's lead time for people to start to invest in an orderly fashion. So I think Vietnam the market has grown tremendously in the last 6 to 9 months, at least in nominal terms, although a lot of companies are being listed at extremely small free float. So, but there has been a resumption of the removal of foreign ownership limits, and MSCI Emerging. We're not saying that this is a guaranteed event, but MSCI, can put Vietnam on the MSCI Emerging Watch list if it wants to, because it has ticked the boxes, and it's certainly the reforms are going in the right direction, and it would certainly provide encouragement to Vietnam to continue with those reforms in order to get into the index in a year's or 2 years' time. So we're hopeful, but not 100% convinced.